Welcome to Regulatory Ramblings. Before introducing today's guest, I'd like to talk a little bit about the state of the world and people's choices. Around the world, few professions outside of banking and financial services afford those of average intelligence and ability the opportunity to enjoy, at the very least, a middle-class existence. And certainly in Hong Kong, many do much better than that. And you look around the Asia Pacific, New York, London, it's much the same story. People do well in financial services and banking who otherwise couldn't hack it elsewhere. It's also a field in which sometimes people go along to get along. And sometimes that leads to malfeasance being overlooked. Sadly, that also extends to the compliance profession. And not just the bankers and the traders, but those that are supposed to oversee them as well. And they don't want to rock the boat because they're earning a comfortable living. They don't want to get a bad reputation in the business. And they get performance bonuses tied to how well their particular bank or institution or fund does. So why mess with a good thing? An exception to that is Everett who in 2010, as an AML compliance officer with HSBC in the U.S. state of Delaware, displayed the kind of moral resolve and backbone which is rarely evident in financial and corporate circles these days. Specifically, he exposed illegal money laundering transactions at HSBC involving Hamas and Hezbollah, and despite numerous alerts to his supervisor, his warnings went unheeded. At that point, he contacted the FBI, which began its investigation of HSBC. He then reached a resignation agreement with HSBC in October of 2011, at which point he was blacklisted by the financial community. Undeterred, Everett founded the private intelligence firm Tactical Rabbit and was most recently an independent conservative candidate for the United States Senate. Everett Stern, thank you for joining us.
Thank you much for having me. It's certainly an absolute honor. Thank you very much.
No, the honor is ours. You graduated, if we're talking about what really caused concepts like AML, KYC, terrorist financing to seep into the public consciousness, I'd have to say in the modern era, it's real. Many of us grew up in the 80s watching Miami Vice, so we'd heard the term money laundering in connection with drug money and things of that nature. But in terms of the severity, why it's important, I'd say 9/11 was the major wake-up call in that regard to the average man on the street. And you graduated from high school a year after 9/11. Certainly for me, I lost friends that day. I shifted my focus in terms of law school and the type of graduate research I wanted to do to terrorist financing. I did my dissertation on the Patriot Act and how it amended the Older Bank Secrecy Act for AML purposes. But you graduated a year after from high school, a year after 9/11. Did that have an impact on you, and what role did it play in drawing you into AML and financial crime compliance as a career?
Yeah, that's actually a very, very, very good point. 9/11 was definitely the starting point for me in my career. I talk about this a little bit in my book, Dark Money and Private Spies, but right after 9/11 occurred, I graduated. I graduated high school shortly thereafter, but I went to go do an internship on Wall Street, and I'll never forget. I was working on the American Stock Exchange, and I was clerking for an options specialist, just as an intern, and a lot of people don't know about this about me, actually, about my past, but I used to walk by, the still smoldering buildings of 9/11, and down at the World Trade Center, and
it was a rough sight. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a really rough site. And then, what happened was in college, I ended up wanting to be a trader. I mean, that's actually what I wanted to do. Was to be a trader and be a specialist on the floor. And then I kept doing these internships throughout college, and then I don't know, it was one walk too many past that site, and it hit me where I said I want to make more of a significant positive difference, and that's when I decided I wanted to join the CIA. So it was on. So I applied for the CIA when I was in college. So it's a funny story. On Valentine's Day, February 14th of 2006. That was my first interview with the agent with the agency, and I'll never forget. I was dating this girl at the time, and she broke up with me because I couldn't tell her where I was going. And it was Valentine's Day, and that so that was the end of that. So anyways, I ended up in this recruitment process with the Central Intelligence Agency, and then I ended up going on to try and go for a clandestine service, which was actually field operations with the Central Intelligence Agency, and eventually I was rejected from the program, but that's what kind of gave me the bug to want to be able to go after the bad guys and really try to make a difference. And then I ended up getting back in where I was being reconsidered for the Central Intelligence Agency again in 2008, 2010, around that period. And this is when I was in business school doing my MBA again. And then my final rejection, that's when I went on to apply for a job at HSBC Bank. But it was interesting because I didn't know it was HSBC. On these job applications. They kept it confidential, so you didn't know where you were applying. I just saw it was for an anti-money laundering compliance officer. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know what an AML compliance officer was, or much about money laundering or anything.
Yeah, but I mean, there you were young, you were hungry, eager to learn, and you had an MBA, which from a good school, so that counted for something. So a decade on, with the benefit of time and distance, how do you feel about your decision to go to the authorities? Because a lot of people would have been like, it's not my problem. I've done my part. I've alerted my superiors. And if there's any fallout, it's on them because I've done my part. I mean, if push came to shove, would you do the same thing again, or what, if anything, would you have done differently?
Yeah, absolutely. I would have done the same thing 10 times over without hesitation. And I say that because it was the right thing to do. And even though I suffered tremendous consequences as a result, and I still am suffering those consequences, it doesn't matter. I mean, positive did come out of this, but circumventing back to the original point, is that I went to my supervisors multiple times, and they kept brushing me aside, and they hired me to begin with because they thought I was an idiot, and they thought I would just go along with their scheme or what they were doing. And what I found, though, was criminal, intentional criminal manipulation of the wire filter there. And I saw, it took me a while to figure it out, but I saw some real, criminal, not just money laundering, but we're talking terrorist and drug cartel financing. And, wars cost money. And if you don't cut off the money supply, the enemy is going to win. It's just that simple. And I'll never forget, because you're right. I had, finally, it took me a long road, decade later, right, to get the job where I was making 54,900, which, which is a lot of money, and especially for 20. God, I must have been 20. 4 or 2023. I was a young guy, and 54 now I had my own apartment, my own car. I was paying for it. My parents were proud because I was sufficient finally, right? I mean, so that, I didn't want to disappoint them. And I knew I had to go to the authorities with this. The problem I had, though, which was very significant, was that my boss was a former counterintelligence FBI agent. And this was a huge problem for me because a counterintelligence agent is someone who hunts spies, and they're very good at doing so. So I had to get past this bastard for a good year and a half, but I was able to. He needs to go back to the academy because I was definitely able to get past him. But the issue though is that I didn't want to go to the FBI because of this individual, and I was afraid there was a compromise or something. I didn't know. I mean, I was a young guy. I didn't know. So I went to the CIA at first. So, and then I went to the FBI later. But I'll never forget that night when I wrote an email to my CIA recruiter, my former CIA recruiter, and I was just outlaying this transaction, and I was going to report HSBC in, and I knew the second I sent that email, my life was going to change dramatically. And it must have been 2 a.m. In fact, it was 2:15 in the morning. And I still have the email to this day. And I was tossing and turning in bed. And I said, you know what? I have to protect the United States, because that's what this was. It was a national security issue. This was not just, it's even a worldwide issue, because it affected, all of our allies and everybody, and I submitted the email, and I said, you know what? Whatever happens to me happens. And it was a self-sacrificial thing. And I said, I have to do what's in the best interest of the United States and the greater good. And that's what this came down to was, okay, is this about Everett Stern, or is this about the greater good? And I chose the greater good.
And the world is better off for it, for sure. I mean, in terms of you saying they hired you because they thought you were an idiot, I mean, there's no shortage of yes men in the compliance profession. You see that even here in Hong Kong, people who will do the bare minimum, perform their duties in a slipshod manner, not question too much, and on come the good things that come along with not rocking the boat: promotions, higher pay, more seniority in your profession. And again, there are people that are content with that. I mean, and yes, the profession's been jarred by 9/11, and I was watching your case very closely because I joined Thomson Reuters in May of 2011, so I was keenly interested in your case. And so just over a decade later, has the industry changed much? Or are they taking financial crime compliance seriously, or is it just another cost of business? Because they're certainly not concerned about reputational damage.
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is no, because in large part because of what happened in HSBC. Because at HSBC they were fined, $1.92 billion, which a lot of people say, oh wow, that's a lot of money. It's not. It was only 5 weeks of their profit, which was nothing, and nobody went to jail, right? And that was the big one, and that was what hit me hard, hardest, because I wanted to see someone go to jail, because what they were doing was disgusting, and it was wrong, and it was illegal, and that showed the banking community, for the next up until now, that you'll get away with it. I mean, bankers are just not going to jail. And again, people don't understand is that sometimes it's the CEO or the banker writing the check that goes to the terrorist, the drug cartel. It's that money that's used to make, some bomb or some type of, weapon or, to something. I mean, these are very, it takes money. Again, wars cost money. So, the banking community today and financial community in general, it's a cost of doing business, paying these fines. It's just a matter of mitigating the risk of how much fine you're going to get. But every bank is expecting some level of fine. And now we have the fintechs, which makes things more unique because some of these fintechs are just operating in a whole nother stratosphere where they're not even being held the same compliance standards as a normal bank, so they can just do what they want. And then you also have the real banks that have the most risk, and I feel are the best places to bank, are the community banks. Because the community banks, they get fined for something, they're going under. I mean, they're not able to shell out $1 billion to cover themselves. I mean, they will go under. So they make sure that every single transaction and KYC and that every customer is known and the due diligence is done to the nth degree. But
they're the ones that get hit with the rising cost of compliance.
Right, correct. That's a very good point. Right, the burden is, they're getting hit with tremendous fees. And what's interesting is that, how do we solve this problem? Because the problem really is that the United States government, or governments around the world, in London or in Hong Kong, wherever, they can't have a banking failure, right? Because that's what's going to destroy the economy. So these banks have tremendous leverage over, over these massive governments, because they can turn around and say, well, you can't take us out because you're going to cause a financial panic if you do so. So you just got to fine us, and this is this,
and you just have to live with it. Yeah, I mean that is their attitude. You just have to live with it. I mean, there was an episode of the Kaiser. I think you appeared on the Kaiser Report some years back, didn't I think on RT. There was an episode of the Kaiser Report where a former London Metro cop was giving a presentation about malfeasance in the financial sector. And supposedly, according to him, a banker walked up to him and said, "Everything you said is all well and good. It's all true. But not a member of my class / profession will ever see a moment in jail because of it." Now, who's to say if the story is true or not? But if there's even an ounce of truth to it, some would say that that's a subversive statement, that this segment of society is, in a sense, above the law, because it will rattle society too much because they keep the financial flows going. They're too integral to the economy, too big to fail, all the rest of it. And we saw shades of this with, 2008, and times are good. They know they'll always be bailed out because, what would that do to social stability? What would that do to the economy? That when times are good, therefore, you're making double-digit returns. When times are bad, there's no downside. That they know they're going to be protected. And as far as, that's just banking in general. Speaking specifically about HSBC, you're talking about one of the largest, most powerful banks on earth. At that time, they were getting hit around the world during the last decade, which prompted one of our guests, Bill Miker, who was our guest on our inaugural show, to once say to me, "Why are they not getting hit in Hong Kong?" Because they're a major employer here. They are too key to the local economy. That again, they're too interwoven with too many facets of society sometimes. That the thought of taking action against them is just completely off the table. And come back to your point, people don't realize that this isn't just a. There comes a point where crimes are of such a severity that they become a national security issue.
Right, exactly. And that's what I was dealing with back in 2010. And that's what we're still dealing with today, are national security issues that affect the threat of human life. I mean, that's what this comes down to. It's not about money anymore. This is much deeper than that, and much more sinister than that. This is very serious, and I'm telling you, the only way to solve this problem is by locking some people up, and you'll start seeing some people get into line. But again, you have to understand the entire compliance program in 2010 at HSBC, 2012. HSBC designed a system to deceive the United States government and its regulators. By the way, I never saw a regulator in my life, which is credible to me. I thought they were like leprechauns or something. But they never, they never, they designed a system made to deceive the United States government into thinking that they were closing the appropriate amount of alerts and they had the appropriate system, but the system itself that they designed was faulty. And you had always consulting firms helping them and committing this grand larceny, as you say. But it was just again, the second you start wiring money, I mean, we're talking money was going from because again, HSBC is the largest correspondent bank in the world. So their correspondent banking division, and that's where I worked, was in their correspondent banking division, was that the wires, I saw they were going to Hezbollah members, which were, it was found out that these people were literally making the IEDs to improvise explosive devices to blow up our troops in Afghanistan and in other places. This is not acceptable. This is not okay. And that's what the big trigger for me to get into politics was this factor, because I saw the HSBC. One of the reasons I started running for U.S. Senate was that I saw the HSBC was they actually formed a PAC, a political action committee, and they started donating money to senators and congressmen on the Senate Bank Financing Committee. And it's a huge problem. They're trying to buy up people in Washington. And this is just absolute corruption to me. They should not be, a bank that's giving money to terrorist organizations to kill American troops should not be giving money to our congressmen and senators. And that's why I jumped in the race to help make a difference in Washington. So eventually, when it's my time and I get into Washington, I can assure you I will be shutting HSBC down.
Fair point. And your choice, John Featherman, made it through. So at least, we have.
Look, I mean, I had and the decisions that I make overall in life, I think, believe me, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of decisions I try to make in life are geared towards more of the greater good decisions instead of my own personal development. Maybe that's a bad thing. I don't know, but I'm trying to do because look, I for instance, and a lot of people praised me with the Fetterman decision and what I did there, but I disagree with some of the things he does, but you know what? It didn't matter because it was like a greater good decision. So it's like what's best for the country. It was kind of that this type of thinking. And that thinking comes from, I think, my parents, my dad, I come from a, pretty, normal type household, but my dad always kind of taught me growing up, he was like, no matter what, you just do you do the next right thing and you'll be okay. And you always think of that greater good. And I'm not sure where my dad got that from. I have to ask him, but I'll never forget, which was very significant to me in my life. When I left high school, I went to college, my dad gave me Emerson's Success Poem. And if you haven't read this poem, you should definitely read it. But he gave it to me in this framed, this nice, beautiful frame. And my cubicle at HSBC, it was in a little tiny cubicle, but I had this giant Emerson, poem framed, and it said success, and it's the true definition of success. And that's what really allowed me to help take down HSBC and allowed me to do things. And, I even have the poem right in front of me in my office. But the last line of the poem is, you want to live your life to know that you've helped redeem a redeemed social condition, and to know that even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded. And so there's a whole poem, but again, to know that one life has breathed easier because of you, that's what it's about. It's not money. It's not, too many people are money focused. And I even remember in business school, my professors would always teach maximization of shareholder wealth. And they drilled that into us. And I always felt that was wrong, because I believe it's kind of maximization of the human condition, and you help people and the money comes with it. Like, the focus shouldn't be profits. It needs to be helping people, and then the money will just come. And it's true. Really, the most successful entrepreneurs out there, they don't focus on profits. They're focusing on helping people.
It was a big deal that you, in the eyes of some, that you endorsed John Fetterman, and that, people think, Reagan's 11th commandment, thou shalt not speak ill of another Republican and all that. But I mean, obviously the national interest is what drove you, what's right for the country. And you've exemplified that on other occasions. I mean, you've been a Republican most of your life, I've gathered. You're still somewhat right of center in your political inclinations, yet you work with Congresswoman Maxine Waters, a Democrat from California, on the Holding Individuals Accountable and Deterring Money Laundering Act, which sought to give FinCEN, which for our viewers is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. It's part of the U.S. Treasury that collects and analyzes information about financial transactions in order to combat domestic, international money laundering, terrorist financing, and other financial crimes. The aim of that legislation was to give FinCEN the authority to litigate on its own and to stiffen penalties and prison sentences for bank executives involved in money laundering. So what you were willing to do versus the state of Washington now, I mean, what does that say about the need for bipartisanship in dealing with AML and financial crime writ large? Because again, this isn't just about organized crime and drug cartels and dirty money. This is ultimately a national security issue. People don't realize it imperils global security.
Correct. So because it's a national security issue, there has to be a bipartisan working together. Both sides of the aisle here, and a lot of people criticize me for working with Congressman Maxine Waters and on the Republican side when I was in the Republican primary,
because she's pretty far to the left of you.
Very far.
Most issues.
Look, Congressman Maxine Waters is very, very far to the left. Very nice lady and everything, but very far to the left. But look, I'm able to look, and other people should be able to look beyond certain issues and find a common, bond and a common ground to work from. And I believe strongly in that you have sometimes, look, you might disagree with certain people or opinions, but look, we're all humans at the end of the day, and we all have to work together to advance, to advance the whole human race, and that can't be done one individual at a time, or people splitting up into groups. And it's not how this works. We're all in this together, and the second we all realize that, especially in Washington and in the United States and throughout the world, we'll have a lot less, wars, and a lot more peace. And I know that sounds altruistic and everything, but I'm telling
Given
you,
that liberals are supposed to be the idealists and the utopians.
But me is, I'm telling you, based on what I saw at HSBC, and I come back to HSBC because that's kind of my foundation for launching this war of trying to bring people, together and crossing the aisle. Like I understand the need as to why we need to cross the aisle. Like, for instance, Congressman Waters' bill, to hold executives accountable and put bankers in jail. I mean, that is something we need to have. That was something I needed to help with. And that was something that I needed to cross the aisle with. I don't care if she's in Green Party, just whatever. It doesn't matter. She or far left Democrat, doesn't matter. That was something that we all could benefit from. And I found, to be perfectly honest with you, the whole, Trump notion, it was in the political show, but as a Republican, this is where I started to divide and split from the party, because I felt that Trump caused a major division within our country, which prevented this bipartisan nature that would allow us to advance, farther to help our future generations.
Yeah. I don't know what historians will say about this chapter of U.S. history, given the tumult, tumult that it caused, the tumult that it exposed, the fissures in society. But certainly your approach of going at it depending on the issue and letting that determine who you will align yourself with. I mean, that's certainly what the founding fathers of the U.S. envisioned, rather than political parties. And political parties were seen as, I think, corrosive to national unity for the first 3 decades of the Republic. But yeah, that's what they envisioned: changing coalitions depending on the issue, and that they felt was healthier for democracy.
It's about country over party.
Yeah.
And my allegiance is to the U.S. Constitution and not to any party.
Well, that's perfectly honorable position to have. In terms of, I mean, you were undeterred after what happened with you at HSBC, and you started your own firm, Tactical Rabbit. Can you tell us anything about the types of work you do and the projects you're engaged in?
Yeah, of course. But before I get into that, because a lot of people, they ask me, they're like, how did you go, from this HSBC whistleblower being blacklisted to forming this, what became this large private intelligence agency? And what was interesting is, I can say, is the word, grit is what really did it, because I went from working at a Chinese bank to a Chinese restaurant, and I was working at P.F. Chang's.
I was in Dubai recently, and I made it a point to patronize their restaurant out of respect for, them giving you employment.
Thank you. No, that's very good. Believe me, if you're out there listening to this, watching this, go to P.F. Chang's, get some chicken lo mein, support the cause, support the restaurant. They supported me. I mean, I had nothing. You have to remember, I was sleeping on a cot. I was in a 300-400 square foot apartment. Yeah, I lost everything. I mean, everything known to man. I was eating hot dogs without the bun. I couldn't even afford the bread. I mean, it was just a disaster. I mean, it was really bad. And my dad had cancer, and my parents, they couldn't support me, and yeah. So I'll never forget, as I was writing the Senate report, HSBC sponsoring terrorism to the U.S. Senate, because there's all these Senate hearings and everything that occurred. I got a job. I'll never forget. I took, first Rolling Stone did a piece on me. Well, first Reuters came out with an article, and then Rolling Stone came out with this great feature, which was awesome. And I'll never forget, I went down to PF Chang's and I showed him the Rolling Stone, my picture in Rolling Stone magazine, and I said, look, I need a job. And the guy didn't believe me at first. He was, and he said, well, have you waited tables before? I said, well, no, I have an MBA, but I don't know, I've never waited a table in my life. So he said, you know what? They called me the next day and they said, you know what? We looked you up. You did the right thing. We'll give you a job, and the managers will stay late and they'll teach you how to wait tables and hold a tray properly. And it was amazing what they did.
No, that was big of them. No, seriously, yeah.
It's huge. And they gave me food and everything, and they, take home every night, and they saved me. And anyways, I took that money that I was making. So I would wait tables, and then I launched Tactical Rabbit.
Seriously, folks, go to PF Chang's.
Yeah, so I would, so that's what I would do. I would wait tables and launch this company, and it took a good 2 to 3 years for it to really start ramping up. But once it ramped up, people saw my sincerity and what I was trying to do, and the mission behind Tactical Rabbit is to fill intelligence gaps, and be able to support national security and national security was the priority, but also for our private clients, I wanted to help community banks. Larger banks wouldn't hire me, but other types of consulting firms. We did AML compliance, due diligence, work with private equity firms, mergers and acquisitions. I put a team together, and me personally, we would function as this network of people that would provide kind of these power brokerage type services. And actually now I started Everett Stern and Company, which is really a power broker type firm, which is unbelievable talent that can pretty much solve any problem out there. And that's what I realized with Tactical Rabbit. I wanted to create something that was a problem solving, but its main mission was to prevent the next HSBC from happening. That's what Tactical Rabbit really was for. It was to prevent that next HSBC. And it worked. And honestly, there were times where I didn't think it was going to work, and there were times where it was really hard, but it worked. And now with this Everett Stern Company, I'm excited about that new venture. And so but I will tell you one thing: people who think that starting companies is easy it's certainly not. It's certainly not an easy feat. And you have to you got to put pride aside in doing that type of work, because when any company, I'm telling you, I'll be on the phone with a client, then I would get out of my suit, and then I would go and wait tables, and then come back the next day. And actually, it was funny. This is a funny. Now I had this huge meeting on Wall Street, actually, with this big private equity firm, and I'm not going to say the name of it or anything, but I only had one suit because I was just starting out. I had one suit to really work with, but I knew these Wall Street guys kind of recognized different clothing and ties. So I ordered like Ferragamo ties off eBay that were used, and I would I got had them dry cleaned, of course, but it was just I dressed the part, right? It was I did what I had to do back then. I mean, I was still a young guy, but look, I had nothing. I did what I had to do to get where I am now, 10 years later. I'm doing okay now, thank God. But I'm certainly not. Now I'm buying the real, Farragon with ties, but I'm not wearing anything off eBay or anything. But like this thing's actually real. It's not.
You gotta look. It's true for several professions. The one I'm affiliated with, albeit loosely, I still need to take the bar exam, but the legal profession, you got to look the part.
Absolutely.
Perception becomes reality. So never more so than with bankers, and what they seek to project. No, but I mean you've done well for yourself. I mean, it seems like you're dealing with many of the same issues, albeit from now you're in the private sector, you're offering those solutions to institutional clients. So based on what you see, what are the hot, topical, and timely issues in AML and financial crime compliance that need to be addressed that are not being addressed these days, do you think?
Yes, I would say cryptocurrency compliance is a really big one. We're seeing a lot of people getting scammed and ripped off.
Crypto does pose threats. I mean, in terms of what's hot and topical and timely in the world of AML and financial crime compliance. I mean, everyone seems to be talking about crypto.
Sanctions is another big one. I mean, we're hunting right now for, tons of Russian sanctions. We're just trying to identify are companies that have recently been sanctioned, and the ties, the second degree and third degree connections that are here in the U.S., and trying to hunt them down and trying to find possible money laundering. And we're seeing a lot of right now we uncovered Russian money being laundered with a couple of different NASDAQ companies, which is very serious. We've reported that to the SEC and also the FBI. We're dealing with, but the money laundering on NASDAQ with the Russians is very concerning to us. And that's really like an SVR type operation.
The Foreign Intelligence Service.
I'm sorry?
Their Foreign Intelligence Service.
Yeah. So they are operating here in the U.S., which is extremely concerning. And that's something that's on our radar. It's on the USG's radar. But besides the sanctions, we have the crypto, and I would say another real hot topic, I guess, like an AML, that we're seeing is just kind of the changing of laws, and a lot of people just still don't know what they're doing, especially with these popping ups of different MSBs that are happening. It's just people we're seeing a lot of people who want to start MSBs. We're seeing a tremendous amount of laundering of money through casinos. We're seeing that. It's just it's interesting. A lot of this old tricks just get revamped into different types of vehicles to be able to accomplish the same old type of money laundering. So but money, again, money laundering, people just tend to forget, is the concealment of the source of funds, right? So it's not just people, so and the question is, why is someone concealing those funds? So usually money laundering is tied in with multiple other crimes that are happening. But we're also what I'm seeing in the AML world, and is actually counterfeit goods. We're running into this a lot, actually coming in from China and coming in from a couple other countries, but counterfeit goods is a big one. And especially counterfeit pills, the pharma. I mean, that's killing a lot of people, and that's people think of like the Coach bags and like the Gucci bags and things like that. All that's a Hezbollah way of it's like a key Hezbollah way of doing things, but also the pills. All that's just a form of money laundering. That's really what that is. And the problem is a lot of financial institutions and shipping companies actually, they're now having to start to deal with AML type laws because supply chain and logistics firms don't know how to deal with AML.
Oh, the TBM, trade-based money laundering. Yeah.
Right. So they're not used to dealing with that. They're used to dealing with it just on usually banks are just having to deal with it. So we're seeing is this AML, spreading, but the anti part where the countering of it is not really there because people don't know how to do it, or they don't understand the complex sophistication of how to solve those types of problems.
I mean, there's a confluence of things that come to mind when I hear you say that, because in terms of old tricks are being used, repackaged in new ways. I mean, to me, that says everything's a variation on a theme. When I look at articles I wrote years ago in the field of AML, they're still dealing with many of this. Okay, legislation, new guidances, regs may have been passed in the interim, but they're still dealing with many of the same fundamental problems. I mean, that says to me precious little changes in the world. At the end of the day, what is money laundering other than the transmission of value? And water finds its own level, of course, is through the path of least resistance. On the trade-based money laundering angle, you're right. For the longest time, in shipping, they didn't really deal with it. I think the fixation is too much on, when it comes to trade-based money laundering, the fixation is too much on the money laundering aspects, and other actors in the supply chain tend to get ignored, like warehouses, for example, or basic things like was the manifest checked? Did the vessel in question actually leave port X and make it to port Y? Or were they did they deviate along the way and go elsewhere? Little things like that. But in terms of counterfeit goods, I mean, it's often said that, I can see why, and it's not just organized crime, I can see why terrorists might be interested in that, because, I mean, well, now we've got stuff online. But there was a time not that long ago when people would go across the border to mainland China to get the latest movies on DVD. And, having worked at a private investigators firm in my teen years, I mean, even in the 90s, it was known the money's as good as drugs and the penalties were a lot less.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing is that when it comes to counterfeit goods, this has been around for a while. I mean, and I could point to people in the Indian community who, for the longest time, were in the import-export business. And this was in the days of GATT trips, before the World Trade Organization, when the tariffs were a lot higher. You wouldn't write too much. You'd just say video games. The more details you'd put, the more the customs and excise people in the U.S. would get suspicious. You just put games, and that would go through, and you'd of course understate the value of the goods. So you're getting around IP laws, and you were getting around customs duties, or lowering the customs duties you did pay. And this is just it's a fine. What worked for that works just as well for money laundering because, again, what's money laundering other than the transmission of value?
Right. Yeah. No. Exactly. I mean, that handbag, I mean, is a way for Hezbollah to get. So let's say there's a Hezbollah cell operating in the United States. That's a way for it to get it's just to convert to get that handbag into the United States, and then it's converted into dollar bills by selling it. So it's a way to supply that cell with money through a handbag. The handbag is the representation of money, and people they don't realize that, and shippers and they're missing this point a lot. But the problem is there's no real oversight that's coming down. There's oversight on the counterfeit good, but there's not a real type of compliance for AML. There's not real AML compliance for these types of goods and illicit transactions. It's just not there. The focus is a little different, but
it's too much on the IP. It's too much on the IP violation side that people don't see the interconnections between things. They're looking at things in too compartmentalized a way.
Right, exactly.
Contraband has a money laundering aspect to it.
Yes, yeah, exactly, right, 100%, and that's what's being missed. And I think if vendors were to and that's something that we're helping with now is being able to strengthen supply chains by helping supply chain and logistic firms be able to vet and be able to make sure those that kind of like a due diligence checklist for a supply chain. I mean, it doesn't exist. Again, Bank Secrecy Act is not applying towards supply chain and logistics, and it should. There should be a different type of of Bank Secrecy Act, and that would, you would see so many counterfeits go away in a heartbeat. So we're trying to get to protect companies, but the companies are, as you're pointing out, are more concerned on the IP side because they don't want to get sued, or they don't want to get jammed up, or it's a different or fined from the IP. It's different. They're not the AML side is not there yet, and that's what the government needs to recognize, and I think the industry needs to be taught about that, because again, what that counterfeit is, and also the public needs to be really be made aware, because when you buy, people think it's a harmless thing when you buy some counterfeit, Rolex. They say,
so what if I go to Queens and get knockoff sneakers? I mean, yeah.
Right, exactly. It's no big deal. When in fact that is facilitating and allowing organized crime or a terrorist cell or something to be, it's allowing money laundering. I mean, that's what it is. So there has to be this Bank Secrecy Act, which stems off Patriot Act. It has to be extended across multiple industries, because there's so many things that so many industries where this where it's money laundering. It's just people just don't realize it.
See, it makes sense when you're a student to study things in isolation, because for their level of understanding at that point in their lives, that's what you're going to do, little baby steps. Only when you get older, you see the seamless web and how everything's connected. But let's be honest, talking about supply chains isn't sexy. People write that off as logistics. You talk about terrorist financing, you talk about crypto, you talk about money laundering. Then they pay attention. I mean, it's almost as though the piano has got to drop on their heads for them to wake up. I mean, and someone needs to be explicit in packaging a presentation or webinar or seminar one of these days about the money laundering or financial crime aspects of counterfeit goods. Only, only when you put it to them in those obviously blatant terms will they pay attention, because and that connection isn't really being made, certainly not in terms of those that provide training. But I mean, when it comes to money laundering, I mean, historically, a lot has gone on in Brighton Beach, where there are a lot of, white Orthodox Russians. I don't want to pick on a particular community, but it is a community that is in focus right now across the world. And do you think there's heightened scrutiny on them because of the Russia sanctions? And is that necessarily fair? Because during the Bush years, there was concern about, you're picking on Muslims and Arabs, and now they're talking about Russophobia around the world. And I mean, do you think the intelligence services and law enforcement are scrutinizing places like Brighton Beach or Russian communities across the U.S., given the activities of certain Russian agents?
Yeah, no, 100%, and they should be. So it's not discriminatory. It's a difference,
because the question is, what other choice do they have?
Right, they have to. Look, it's not discriminatory. It's with valid reason. Look, we're at a kind of a, not at a kind of. I mean, we're basically at war with China, with Russia right now. I mean, Russia is an enemy of the United States. The Russian central bank has been sanctioned. People who work for Russia are sanctioned. I mean, this is a serious, very serious situation that's occurring. The CIA is supplying weapons into Ukraine. I mean, we don't know that for a fact, but most likely that's what's occurring. So is NATO. So yeah, it's a very serious. But tying back into Brighton Beach, and I get what certain community leaders are saying, but no, look, there are Russian SVR agents and also witting assets that have handlers in these areas, and they are being utilized, and they're being utilized to work against the United States. From a counterintelligence standpoint, I don't care what race or religion you are. If you're operating against the United States government, they need to be taken down. And in order to do that, what has to take place is an infiltration of the group, an actual human intelligence operation where they are engaged and penetrating and becoming a member in the community and ingraining themselves and learning and collecting intelligence, passing that on, building a case. And you'll see more and more arrests as time goes on. And a lot of this money, again, is being laundered. It's being, especially, I hate to say it, but there's a type of money laundering done through nonprofits and religious communities. Actual different types of religious entities, and unfortunately, different religious leaders get caught up in this. And sometimes they know, other times they simply don't, but they don't understand it. But either way, it doesn't matter if you understand something or not. If you do something illegal, you're going to go to jail. And yeah, I think you're going to see, I can tell you from our investigations that we're doing, we've already, targeted and seen a lot go on in certain very Orthodox community. I'm not going to say the name of the religious organization, but we were seeing certain types of donations that don't make sense. and you can see they post, and there's these people are stupid, they post them online, but we
some of them are pretty brazen.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, look,
yeah.
through OSINT capability, we're able to see this, but people who make a donation, right? They normally want credit for it, or they want some type of accolades or something.
Yeah.
So they're so we're able to pick up on. But the question is, why are why are these donations so big? And we're seeing a lot of this happen in the Russian communities, where massive donations are being made. And usually what happens is, in this type of scenario, is the religious leader then starts issuing out checks or these smurfing type operations on behalf of the person. And again, whether they know or not, it doesn't matter. You can't issue out donations back out to the community, but they're doing a smurfing op where they're issuing out smaller dollar amounts to multiple individuals, and they do this over time. So they're acting as a bank, right? So you have this religious community now that now has its centralized bank. Instead of being in Russia or being wherever, it is now within the religious community, which is a disaster. And it's very hard to trace, because a lot of these religious communities are so tight and interwoven, it's very hard to penetrate them. So,
and even amongst the Orthodox Church, I mean, you don't see that much mixing between. Well, you might see some mixing between the Serbian Orthodox Church and the Russian Orthodox Church, but even then, these are communities in their own right, and they're pretty tight.
Oh yeah, and I'm also not only on the church side, but on the Jewish side as well. We've seen this done on the Muslim side. Do
Orthodox Jews talk to conservative Jews?
Yeah, there's certain Orthodox Jews that are Russian based, that are different, that are a whole different sect than the other, and like they'll only speak Russian to each other. It's a very tight community. They don't
talk to the Yiddish people.
No, they don't consider them, and they don't even consider themselves Orthodox. They're different than Orthodox. So I don't want to say there's a certain name for it, but we're seeing in those communities, we see tremendous types of financial crimes occur as well, because again, it's an isolated. Anytime you have an isolated community that is so tight and interwoven, especially around a religious base, it's just a problem. And again, not just on the Jewish side or Christian side or Catholic or Muslim. It's across all religions.
And people in these traditional societies like dealing in cash.
Yeah, absolutely. You dealt with the Hawala system, with Muslims, and Jewish and also the Orthodox Church. They deal with a similar type of Hawala type system as well. So we're not just talking, but people don't understand or realize that people just it's unfortunate, right? It's like because we started talking about 9/11 and everything. A lot of people think terrorist financing is terrorist financing relates only to Muslims, and that's not true. Muslims are that's
we had Rabbi Kahana all those years ago, remember? Yeah,
a good example.
Yeah.
So for instance, not all Muslims are not terrorists. There's a difference between a terrorist and there's a difference between there are Jewish terrorists as well, right? I mean, they exist it's across all religions. People don't, but the problem is, like you said before, when students study something, they study in isolation and they don't see the whole web, and people are not seeing. All they're visualizing in their head is Sunni or Shiite and the Hawala system. They're not seeing these other types of mechanisms that yes, the Orthodox Church is using, or different not the Orthodox Church, but certain members of and certain members in different sects in the Jewish community are using. So you're talking similar systems, but people aren't looking in these areas for some. Law enforcement is, but the public isn't, and that's a problem, because when you apply public pressure, it will allow for increased law enforcement activity, and it will increase for more pressure for people to do the right thing and step up within their communities and blow the whistle.
Of course, there's a danger with being too smart. Those that connect the dots and show the interconnections and the interrelationship between things, if they're too smart, they're too knowledgeable, they're too loud about it, they imperil themselves. I mean, I recall a former Thomson Reuters News colleague in Mumbai saying to me, Jay, you could take. It's been known for a number of years that a number of Bollywood films are shot partly in Switzerland because the actors and the crew want to be paid a certain amount under the table in Switzerland, so as to lower their tax bill in India. And he said to me, were you to write a paper, were you to write a deep analytical feature on organized crime, Bollywood, money laundering and tax evasion in Switzerland, ties to Dubai, if you were to tackle one or two, or maybe three of those facets in one article, that'd be one thing. If you were to describe the entire circuit in a piece, that's when it gets dangerous. And that's when people, start dispatching assassins to take out journalists. And so I think we should have special concern for those that bring this type of information to our attention, because they are taking a sizable risk upon themselves for doing so. So we come back to the topic of Russia sanctions and the state of them. Should they be tightened? And if so, how so? Because what's there left to sanction?
Yeah, I mean, Russia. I mean, in my opinion, Russia should be squeezed to the nth degree until every troop, every piece of land is given back to Ukraine, and they are, look. I mean, Russia has launched a absolutely unprovoked attack against the Ukrainian people, and an attack on democracy. And what they did was the wrong thing, and they should not be rewarded or anything until they should be squeezed just tremendously. And you're right. What is there left to squeeze? Well, what's left to take out is Putin himself. I think the more instability, the United States and its allies can cause to Russia, the more I think the higher the chance the oligarchs either assassinate Putin or something something where he gets ousted. But he needs to go. So and that's
no chance
really,
of peace so long as no chance of peaceful negotiations as long as he's in office.
I honestly, there might be temporary peace negotiations, done. I think, but
because the Russian people don't tolerate losers very well.
No, I agree. But that's the thing is, in the long run, I think he's a loose cannon, and I think he is someone we cannot have with their finger on the nuclear button, ready to go. For a green light there. We can't. I think it's too dangerous for the world. to have him in power. I just think he's shown himself to be I don't want to bash people who are mentally ill, but I think he's shown himself to be psychotic and just not he's not fit to lead the Russian people. And I don't think the Russian people have the same vision as he does. He has such a grip on it's kind of like Iran, right? I mean, the people, you see what's going on there, but
Iranians get more sympathy. Russians leaving now, they're like, well, you could have left. There was any number of junctures in which at which you could have left. You only left when things got really bad. And Russians fleeing are getting a lot of flack in the countries that they're seeking refuge in. I mean, and they're not favorable to the regime, but it's said they only left when it got uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, the Ukrainian people are not going to give up on this one, so they need to bow out, and the Russians need to get out of Dodge. And
and speaking of money laundering, they're ending up in Dubai, opening bank accounts by the truckload. They are some of the best customers, I'm told, from those in banking in Dubai, and that's supposedly a U.S. ally.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, I know, that's an interesting point. Dubai is an interesting place.
I mean, I don't want to use them as a whipping boy, and then you've got all the crypto money that's flowing there, and that is indeed how many Russians got their money out of Russia. It's now been shown.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no, there's a number of crypto trusts that trust funds and not trust funds, but crypto opportunity funds that we're seeing. Definitely where the crypto funds are being moved out of Russia. You're 100% correct. But overall, I think Russia needs to be squeezed to the nth degree, we have to get it to a point where the Russian people rise up and replace him and definitely replace Putin as a leader. That is what I believe has to happen in order for there to be world peace. He has to go. Same with North Korea. I think there's an issue there, obviously, and that's it. I mean, we're talking about we're talking about leaders who just have complete instability or just completely unstable, and they're not fit to lead. I mean, firing missiles over the Pacific Ocean is just not appropriate. But Russia obviously has an alliance with the North Koreans, and they're supplying weapons to Iran. I mean, it's a whole. And then I'm very happy to see with the Iranian people how they're they want freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it'll be interesting to see how things pan out. When you reflect on your journey, though, I mean, the path of a whistleblower can be lonely. Certain jurisdictions protect whistleblowers better than others. Less so, I feel, in Asia. I mean, a well-known corporate investigations and business intelligence firm was asked to create a whistleblower program for a mainland Chinese company. They set it up, all the bells and whistles, 24-hour hotline. The company the outside consulting firm managed it. And then their client said, okay, now tell us who all the whistleblowers are. Because presumably they wanted to, take punitive action. and engage in reprisals against them, which the consulting firm did not oblige, and consequently they lost the contract. That's just to give you a sense of a small sense of how things are here. Hong Kong gets a bit better, but how do you feel about the state of whistleblower protections in the U.S. right now? Do they need to be
Yeah,
strengthened, or are they pretty decent? You think?
no. I mean, it's absolutely horrible. I mean, the illusion of it sounds great. Where if you retaliate against a
Well, Sarbanes
whistleblower,
Oxley, and again under Dodd Frank, the protections that
yeah, but no. Let me tell you something. You blow that whistle, you are on your own, and the FBI is not going to help. The government is not going to help. You are on your own, and you better buckle up because it's going to be a wild ride. And if you're a whistleblower where you start getting the media attention that I got, it gets pretty intense. You get death threats, and you get. I mean, I had Hezbollah put up a nice target photo of me and everything.
is that right?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
absolutely.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. Yeah, but it's a definite. It's a definite. Wild experience where it's lonely, and I had so many people tell me, you should have kept your mouth shut, and you would have had it so much easier and had a nice job. And oh yeah, it's a lonely. Yeah, and if you're, yeah, I mean, again, the process of losing everything, and but I have to say though that again, I would do it over again, and if you're a whistleblower,
you certainly seem more relieved. You certainly seem more relieved now than the interviews you gave back in 2010, 2011, when you were still grappling with the issues of, oh my God, this is my life now. You seem more at peace with yourself. Just my impressions, and in that sense, it does seem like a weight has lifted off your chest.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, the thing is that back then, one, I was younger, so I didn't have the maturity. I'm 38 now, but I was having to deal with the media, which I didn't know how to deal with or had any experience with whatsoever. And I didn't have any experience in starting a company and dealing with the government and I mean, there was just so many experiences I had with blowing the whistle. I just it was new, and it was very rattling, and it was very nerve-wracking. And it was something where I mean, honestly, there were times of just absolute depression I ended up in. I mean, I'll never forget, where I was, I was going to take my own life one night. I mean, it got that bad. And I talk about that in my book, where I was just at, I was just at wit's end with everything. And I thought there was no hope. It was just, I was just so depressed. And I had this pet rabbit, and that's actually where the name Tactical Rabbit comes from. And I looked at the rabbit. I was sitting there with a 9mm, and I looked at the rabbit, and I was like, "Who's going to feed the rabbit?" And that's what saved the rabbit saved my life. So that's why I named the company Tactical Rabbit. But but now I'm dealing with a whistleblowing situation. Again with the whole Flynn situation, I'm dealing with that again now, and but now I know how to handle it better, right? So now
that being a reference to former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn.
Correct. Yeah. So now, and now Flynn though has so I testified to the January 6th committee against Flynn, and then in retaliation for being a whistleblower, and I reported to the FBI. I did the same procedures pretty much as HSBC. And then now he sues me for $250 million and I just filed a counterclaim actually this week for $250 million against him. So him and I are now going at it in federal court. So, but now, and there's tons of media now, even more than HSBC. I'm getting so much more media now than before on this one, and it's not something I planned on or anything, but it's just coming with the territory. But I know how to deal with it, and I know how to. But the dangers, though, are actually much greater, I feel, on with this Flynn situation, because a lot of the threats are coming from right-wing extremist groups here in the U.S. When during the HSBC scandal, I was dealing more against the drug cartels, the Sinaloa and Los Zetas drug cartels, and Hezbollah. They were more coming from different countries, or more of a distance. So this is much more much more close at home.
Yeah, I mean the Trump people play for keeps. Certainly, some of them it seems. So I'm glad you didn't off yourself. I mean, the world would have been a much sadder place without you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
No, well, I mean, you've had an impact. So going back to the poem on your wall, one person can have an impact, and certainly that's what we try to impress upon students here in our compliance and regulation program.
Yeah, but it's funny.
Yeah.
I've had people recently, even a lot of celebrities and stuff, tell me with what's going on with Flynn and then with HSBC that I made an impact and I'm a hero and this and that. But I honestly don't feel that way. It's very weird because when I hear people say that, like I hear you say that, I appreciate it and everything, but I don't feel I've made any impact or any difference or anything. It's not a tangible thing. Like I feel more. Honestly, I feel more like a loser because I haven't made enough of an impact I wanted to set out to do. It's weird. I don't know. It's
an incremental thing, but most people would not stick their necks out the way you've done. And again, when the history of this time is written, I mean, I certainly think people like yourself will be mentioned when it comes to the excesses of the financial sector. And I think even people in the Nixon administration talked about it, how by the 70s, the trends, the financialization of the economy were present. The growth, the influence of the financial sector. It's always been there. But there was a time when a banker was considered a respectable member of society, and that they funneled finance capital to those projects that needed financing. Whereas now it's like, I mean, okay, this has always been true. Money makes money, but that is just it. They manage money, they get their fee, they get their cut, they collect their fees. And that is the end in and of itself. And if that is the case, then certainly you want more flowing in so that you can get an even bigger cut. And yeah, I can. I mean, you see this in the private banking and the wealth management sector here, that the information that a relationship manager or private banker has on a particular client is very different to what the compliance guy in the head office has, and that there's more nuance, more subtlety, more personalized detail in terms of what the relationship manager has. And if any of that should provide any indicia of a red flag, they're certainly not going to share it with compliance, because that could mean offloading that customer, or at the very least not onboarding that customer. But then you don't get your commissions. You don't meet your quotas. I mean, that's a universal problem. I mean, people talk about the incentives being skewed, but banks are not shying away from imposing quotas. on their staff. I mean, I think, and in that regard, financial criminals are well positioned to exploit the weaknesses at a lot of banks. So, in terms of you going into compliance, and all the experiences and knowledge you've gained since then, I mean, we've still got a lot of young people that see compliance as a growth field. They're coming at it from law, most obviously, but also from other fields of endeavor, other professions. Any, in the time we've got left, any advice you'd like to give them, particularly when it comes to AML and FCC and KYC, CTF compliance? I mean, what should they know? What should they reflect upon before they, take the plunge and enter the profession?
Yeah, so I would say, forget everything you learned in a book or read about compliance. I would say this is one thing you just have to do, and this is where you'll be okay with yourself and you'll have a good career, and then it's do the next right thing. And that's it. That's it. It's that simple. It's hard. It's much harder than said, easier said than done, but that's what you have to do.
One last thing, a personal question I have to ask though. Given the shortcomings we sometimes see, human frailty, human error, and all that, would it make a difference if more institutions avail themselves of the technologies that are available, AI, machine learning, turning AML and financial crime compliance to a data science matter? Because that's what I hear now, that there will come a point where substantive knowledge of AML won't matter as much, and you might as well just hire a data scientist to head your AML team, because at the end of the day, it's about discerning patterns. And but then, of course, arguments can be made either way. The data scientist may lack certain nuance in terms of discerning certain modalities of financial crime. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it has to be someone who has the capability, again, of doing the right thing, because a data, if it's broken down to what patterns or what rules are broken or what patterns are forming, that there's no judgment there. It's just, okay, is this pattern match X, Y, or Z, or is this rule broken? Or not? There's no judgment, and there's no and in order to have judgment, you have to have a moral compass. So you have to have someone with a strong moral compass in a compliance officer role, and they'll be able to then be able to, because judgment's only acquired by having bad judgment, right? So good judgment is acquired by bad judgment. So in order to get that good judgment, no matter what, you got to have that good, solid moral compass pointing north. So if you don't have your North Star, you're lost, and that means the bank will be lost, and that means the financial community will be lost. You have to know where you're going, and that's for someone not just in this job, but also in life in general. You got to have that North Star, and yeah, things are not in today's world. Things are, it's easy to just say, you know what, let's just break it down to the math and statistics and this and that, and get some statistician in here and figure things out. And I saw that with HSBC. They tried solving their problem by building this fancy new compliance computer system with all these cool rule breaking things and this and that and these bells and whistles on their computer
Reg
software.
tech, I think, yeah, they call it.
Yeah, and then it was just, the whole thing just didn't work because the guy running the show didn't have a North Star or moral compass. So you could have the fanciest stuff, but if you don't know or have the capability of doing the right thing and the next right thing, yeah, it's not going to work.
So a sophisticated system can be thwarted by someone on the inside who has no scruples.
Correct. And someone who's just not going to take the steps to, I mean, the team should be willing to put their neck out. The team should be willing to do things for the greater good. It shouldn't be one person. It's a unit. It's supposed to be mission. The Navy SEALs, they go by a mission-focused philosophy where they focus on the mission. The mission for a compliance officer is not to just, rule out, clear alerts or get pattern, to conduct due diligence. And no, the mission of a compliance officer, I don't care if you're working in New York, London, Hong Kong, wherever you are, your mission, okay, is to save human lives. That's it. That's the mission.
Yeah, with the SEALs, their focus is often on. I've heard some of them say to new recruits, before you embark on this, your focus is on we, not me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is a very real war between good versus evil. And if we cut off that money supply, good will win. But if evil, I think Einstein is the one who said that evil prevails when good men do nothing, or they just stand around and watch and do nothing. Evil will prevail then.
And I mean, coming to your earlier point, I mean, I do think some things you learn through practice, some things you learn through life experience, and specifically on the job. And I think compliance can be a rewarding career. But oftentimes I think compliance is so overrated that it's not a panacea. It will not save an institution from itself if as you said, if the person has no moral compass. But Everett, thank you so much for your time.
It was an honor. Thank you.
This was fun. Let's do it again. And thank you for tuning in. Please come back again.